Thank you very much for inviting me to share our experiences in terms of trying to promote openness and accountability in the use of public finances during this COVID-19 pandemic. The Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, as you have rightfully introduced, we really work on issues of public finance management, and our main entry points are issues around debt and also tax justice, issues of national budgets, and the issue in terms of how the government is raising its revenue, looking from the social and economic justice perspective. So for COVID-19, we were really concerned because we had precedents during Cyclone Idai, which affected the Eastern Highlands, the eastern parts of Zimbabwe, where we saw resources that were aimed for mitigating the impact used and abused by public officials. There was a lot of corruption that actually took place during that time of Cyclone Idai in 2019, beginning of 2019. So when the government proclaimed that COVID-19 was a disaster, a national disaster, and that they were appealing for resources to be able to respond to the impacts of COVID-19, and we thought it was necessary to push that there be openness, there be transparency and accountability in terms of the resources that the government and even the citizens' initiatives were going to mobilize to respond to COVID-19. So as an institution, initially, we did our own financial modeling using 5 key priorities that we had identified that the government should focus on. And those priorities were the issue of personal protective equipment for health workers. It was the issue of upgrading of our ICU units. At the advent of COVID-19, we learned that Zimbabwe, the whole country, only had 16 ventilators. So we also prioritized that the government was supposed to prioritize ventilators. We did priority around additional healthcare workers, because for a long time, for years, the government had frozen some health posts within the Ministry of Health. And we thought it was necessary to unfreeze those and have additional healthcare workers. We also prioritized in our financial modeling the issue of testing and also the social safety nets to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, especially on the vulnerable groups like the informal traders that were going to be affected, women, youth, the elderly, people with disabilities and the like. So these are the 5 priorities that we did financial modeling for. And we then found out that to decently respond, there's no country that can have enough resources or adequate resources and say we have adequate resources. But to decently respond to COVID-19, we realized that maybe the government needed about $388 million to be able to upgrade, because our health system was literally not there at all. So with that in mind, we then developed the COVID-19 tracker. Can you just briefly come back to my slide number 1? So we then, with that financial modeling in place, we then said, okay, the government has to raise this. They were not very clear themselves in terms of exactly how much they needed, because initially I think they put it just at about 150 million. Then they said 126, it wasn't clear, but we were very clear from the civil society perspective in terms of what we wanted. So we developed the tracker with that figure that we had done the financial modeling for. And our motivation was that what we want to see is prudent stewardship of the resources that are going to come in to respond to COVID-19, be it from development partners or what the government itself is actually allocating or redirecting or repurposing to COVID-19. You can go to the next slide. So like I've indicated, the tracker is a civil society initiative. And we then began tracking in terms of what was coming in cash or being pledged in cash, and also in kind, what was being mobilized at the domestic level, and also at what external sources were also bringing in, either directly or indirectly received by the government. Indirectly in the sense that we have, for example, we know the US government will not channel resources directly to the government of Zimbabwe, so it will work kind of with third parties or with civil society organizations or development partners to directly go to specific sectors that benefit the citizens of Zimbabwe. So we're tracking what is coming to the government directly, but also indirectly. The tracker, its purpose is twofold. We were looking at it as an advocacy tool, where we wanted to share that to the government. We have a very different context in terms of sharing of information and openness by the government. But we wanted just to show that it is possible just to be open, just to share information. So it was an advocacy tool towards pushing the government and the administration to just share and be open in terms of COVID funds, and also giving them recommendations in terms of what they should be focusing on a weekly basis. It was also, the other purpose was really to raise awareness on a weekly basis as well amongst the citizens, so that they know what their government or development partners that are working directly with communities are receiving from the different donor community and development partners that are giving resources. So our tracking really on a weekly basis was looking at the issue of pledges, honored pledges, then the amounts that are spent, and the sources of those pledges or of those resources that would have come in. At the end, I'll just show you how the tracker looks like. We can go to the next slide. Maybe before I talk about the successes of the tracker, maybe just to share a bit in terms of where we get the information for the tracker. So for us to really know then who has pledged what has been honored, we mainly depend on the government side itself, on the development partners or on those donors that would have brought in resources, and also on the media. We also depend on the media. What we realized with COVID-19 and for our government and the context that we are in, cameras are always taken where they're going to receive resources. But of course, the cameras are not taken when it comes to the distribution. So we depend really on what the government is saying in terms of what it has received, then the media and the development partners. We realized that we had to really upscale our media monitoring because that is really what we depend mainly on. Like I've said, cameras go where resources are being received, just to, if it's public stance or public relations by our government. So some information actually comes out unintentionally. We get to know, oh, so this is what is happening through the media. So we had to upscale our media monitoring. But the issue of information deficit kind of remained. But we were fortunate in that once the government realized that we were interested and we had this tracker, we were invited to the Ministry of Health and Childcare to sit in what they're calling a committee that's working on procurement and supplies, which is called pillar number 8 of the pillars that they have to respond to COVID-19. So that also has been kind of bridging the information deficit for us to be able to get at least what is happening in terms of how the government is allocating and procuring COVID supplies. So that is also somewhere where we are kind of getting our information from. On that note, because we have this information and we have put all this in our tracker, in our weekly tracker, quite graphic as well in terms of exactly what's happening on a weekly basis, we have managed to kind of register some successes in it. One, I think, is the issue of disclosure and publication of COVID-19 donations in the media by the government. And we were taking that during Cyclone Idai, the government never disclosed what it got. as aid or even as debt for COVID-19. But this year, since we began the tracker and to push and to share for them to disclose the donations matrix, the government actually managed to, has so far disclosed a donations matrix twice, but we still feel that it's just not enough. It could prove why we're saying not enough is that we were pushing for a real-time kind of publication of resources that they are receiving, but also how they're using them. From the tracker as well, we have managed to push for the president to ensure that the Office of the Auditor General is going to audit these resources, the COVID-19 resources, and they're not going to wait until the end, because this was also in our assessment and in our recommendation. They have to do, sorry, I'm being disturbed. They have to do continuous monitoring of how these resources are being used, and they've committed to actually do it kind of in a forensic way. We have managed as well to raise public interest. We have managed to raise public interest and awareness amongst the citizens in public accountability issues. We saw, for example, the breaking of the COVID-Gate scandal, because the citizens were then quite interested in this whole issue, and they began to ask then, the question began, so if the government is raising all these resources that we're seeing in the tracker, how are they using them? So that kind of then created interest in exposing the COVID-Gate and how the government was using the resources. So this is really a plus and a big result for us in that it managed to raise awareness, it managed to ignite and stimulate interest amongst the citizens and the push for the distribution matrix. I know that some of our members have used the tracker to actually engage with the development partners, with the government in terms of where are these resources going. It is high time that the government gives us a distribution matrix. Of course, there is, the unintended outcome that we have seen with the arrest of anti-corruption activists and whistleblowers like Roko Chungono. So this, of course, is not what we intended for it to be. And as well, we are quite vigilant and trying to be careful as we continue to navigate in this context where those that are exposing some of this mismanagement and misuse of resources, you know, floating of procurement procedures are then being harassed and followed on by the state. The challenge, I think, of the information deficit is one that I have spoken about, that our context is not very free in terms of sharing of information, so we have to check on the media and we continue to push for to be able to access information. But I'm glad to report or to share that we just, Parliament and the President have just assented to the Freedom of Information Act, and it is one act that we actually want to try and test now, because it says we should be having, you know, freedom of information and we should get all this information. So it is an act that we're going to test in terms of ensuring that the government discloses all the information that we want them to disclose. I think these are my 3 slides that I have, but I wanted to just show you the tracker. So I don't know if can you see my tracker? Hello?
Not yet.
Not yet. You can't see it yet. Not yet.
You can't. I'm trying. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Yes. So this is the tracker that we have been producing that I was actually talking to. We are on issue number 19 of the tracker. There it just has the overview, because for us, we are saying the resources that the government gets is as important as how they are then used, is as important as how they are disclosed and shared. We have, this is the amount that I was talking to in terms of the projected amount to be able to respond in a dignified and decent way, noting also the challenges that were already existing in our health sector, but also in our economy in terms of the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 on the citizens. So it will have this week, it will have the pledges, but this is the current one, issue 19. So last week, for example, we had no pledges there. Then we had some honored pledges there in the form of about 12 million. Then we have what we could track in terms of what the government used last week for the different priorities that we have from the information that we are getting. But these are the totals now. Since the pandemic was declared a national disaster at the national level, pledges have been made to this tune of 573 million. Then the honored pledges in terms of our tracking is at about 309. And the amount that the government has so far, maybe not exactly what they have managed to spend, but the information that we have that we could pick in terms of what they have used out of that is this amount here of 192. So this kind of then creates that debate and dialogue and conversation, public scrutiny among the citizens to say, so why are we not testing, for example, or why are we not buying PPEs for doctors and nurses? Why is it that they won't strike? So we kind of then use this to push the government to be able to respond to key issues that would have been highlighted. So there we are in graphic terms. This was what we thought, but this is where we are, and this was as it 7 August. These are the partners that have given to Zimbabwe. The government of Zimbabwe itself has allocated or repurposed resources, embassies that have done the same, development agencies that have also committed resources, and what has so far been given out or have been kind of already allocated to specific sector or to a specific priority. So here all they are, including governments, including corporates in Zimbabwe, they have given. We also have citizens initiatives, like I've said, like the GoFundMe and other individuals giving in as well. Then the tracker on a weekly basis has these concerns that it has, that we then push the government for, and recommendations in terms of addressing those. But this is also on our website. It's actually on our landing website, I want to believe. So this is how it looks like. But in terms of also utilizing it, we run kind of a campaign. We pick the tracker into a campaign just to sustain conversations, especially online conversations. Every week we then run a poll based on the concerns, one of the concerns here. So we run a public poll on our Twitter where we ask, for example, has anyone received now the social safety net that was promised by the government of 300 RTGS or Zimbabwe dollars? So people respond if they know anyone or they don't know anyone who is received, or they know that one is received. So when they do that, we then do kind of an opinion paper or a position paper where we share with the government that out there is this concern. So it kind of sustains conversations in the campaign for transparency and accountability in the distribution or in the allocation of the COVID-19 resources. So this is
Jeanette,
what, yes, I'm actually done. So this is just what we have in Aptua. We can engage with the participants on it, but it has been a learning process, but it has been an exciting journey where we believe we've kind of contributed to policy conversations, to citizens at civic agency, where we have seen citizens rising up and actually questioning some of these. Thank you very much.